Hi everyone, good day. This is Dr. Vaughn, and for today, we will be discussing about your endocrine system. So, medyo mahaba-haba ang ating discussion for today, but we will try to simplify our discussion. I know it's very easy for me. So far sa lahat ng system talaga, endocrine talaga ang pinakagusto ko kasi because of the discussion of the different hormones. It's very easy. But I just want you, because this is just basically a review of your physiology. So if you have a very good, strong foundation with your physiology, then endocrine system will be very easy. Okay, let's try. I'll try my best to simplify everything para mas madali nating maalala. Okay, so again, this will be your histology of your endocrine system. Let's take a look at of the major endocrine glands that we will be discussing for today. We will be discussing about your pituitary gland, your pineal gland, your thyroid gland, and of course, the gland that is located posteriorly. So this is your thyroid gland. The gland that is located posteriorly to the thyroid gland, that's gonna be your parathyroid gland. So this is the posterior portion of your thyroid. Dito natin makikita yung ating parathyroid gland. We will also be discussing about your adrenal glands. We will also be discussing your pancreas. Okay? So first, let's start with your pituitary gland. So let's have a very quick review of the anatomy of your pituitary gland. When I say pituitary gland, this is composed now of an anterior part and a posterior part that is directly attached to your hypothalamus region of the brain by your infundibulum, or what we term as your infundibular stalk. Okay, this is your infundibular stalk, attaches your hypothalamus and your pituitary gland. Again, your pituitary gland is subdivided into two: the anterior pituitary gland and your posterior pituitary gland. So your anterior pituitary gland is subdivided into parts: pars tuberalis, this portion here; pars intermedia, this portion here; and pars distalis, this portion here. And then your posterior pituitary gland is subdivided also into two. You have your infundibular stalk, your pars nervosa. Okay? Your gland here, this portion here, occupies now a fossa of your sphenoid bone. This is your sphenoid bone, called now your sila turcica. Again, two parts differ developmentally, structurally, and functionally. Posterior pituitary gland, also known as your neurohypophysis. Anterior pituitary gland, adenohypophysis. Please do not forget about that. Okay? Sige. So, what are the different hormones produced by your pituitary gland? So first, let's talk about your anterior pituitary hormones. What are the hormones produced by the anterior pituitary hormone? First, you have your different, your luteinizing, your follicle stimulating, your thyroid stimulating, your prolactin, your growth hormone, and your ACTH, your adrenocorticotropic hormone. Okay? Each of these hormones will have a specific target and will have a specific effects. Now, question: what will stimulate the release of your pituitary hormone? And by that, it's gonna be your different releasing hormones by your hypothalamus. Okay? Your hypothalamus, this portion here, will secrete different releasing hormone. For example, gonadotropin releasing hormone. This gonadotropin releasing hormone released by the hypothalamus will go now to your anterior pituitary gland. And this GnRH will stimulate now either your luteinizing hormone or your follicle stimulating hormone. That triggers now the release of your LH and your FSH. Now, your LH and FSH will have specific function or specific target. They will target your reproductive system. So what will be the effect? LH, it will now stimulate the production of your sex hormones by the gonads. Your FSH will stimulate naman the production of your sperm and egg cell. That's how your hormones work. Okay? Again, gonadotropin releasing hormone stimulates your LH and FSH. LH and FSH in turn will target now your reproductive system and have several effects. Okay? Now, how about your thyroid releasing hormone? Your TRH, in other hand, will stimulate now the release of your TSH by your pituitary gland. TSH will target now your thyroid gland. And this thyroid gland now will stimulate the release of your thyroid hormones. The function of your thyroid hormone, simply to regulate your metabolism. No? Very easy. Just remember, all hormones from your hypothalamus has this term, releasing hormone. Releasing. Remember, releasing from hypothalamus. Okay? And these are the different pituitary hormones, and they will have a specific target glands. Okay? I know that this is just a review of your physiology, right? But I wanted to review this again all over again. You have to read it again so that, because when you reach clinical chemistry, when you reach your clinical chemistry, these concepts will go back again and again and again. You will have an endocrine system also in your clinical chemistry. So that's why, as early as now, even though that we're still histology, at least you can review the basic concepts. Okay? Sige. Again, let's go to the prolactins. Your prolactins will have an effect to your mammary glands, which will now promote milk production. Your growth hormone will have an effect to your liver, bone, and muscles. This will now induce the target to produce your IGF. And your IGF will stimulate body growth and higher metabolic rate. On the other hand, your ACTH will have an effect to your adrenal glands because they will induce the target to produce glucocorticoids, which regulate the metabolism and the release and the stress response. So we will have a better discussion of your adrenal gland later. Okay? Okay. How about your posterior gland? Your posterior gland or your neurohypophysis will store your antidiuretic hormone and your oxytocin. Just remember, my term is store, does not synthesize, rather store only. Again, I just want to emphasize that your posterior pituitary hormone does not synthesize any hormones at all, but rather it only stores your antidiuretic hormone and your oxytocin. Later on, we will discuss how this your ADH and OT being produced. Okay, ADH, what will be the target? It's going to be your kidney, your sweat glands, and your secretory system for water balance. Okay? Your oxytocin, on the other hand, female reproductive system, which will now triggers uterine contractions during childbirth. Okay? Ito yung ginagamit namin. For example, when we try to induce our patient at a delivery room. For example, the patient is already post-term. Tapos, hindi pa nakanganak. So, for us, so that kailangan kasi malabas ng bata pag post-term because that's gonna be a complication now to the mother and also to the child, to the baby. So, that's why we give your oxytocin because your oxytocin will trigger now uterine contraction. Yan yung ginagawa namin. Okay? Okay. So, again, your hypothalamus hormone is made in the cell body. So, let's try to identify saan ba nanggaling yung ating oxytocin and your antidiuretic hormone. Just remember this. Your oxytocin here, let's take a look at this diagram. Ito, this one, these two diagram, okay? Remember, this portion here is your hypothalamus. Basically speaking, your oxytocin and your antidiuretic hormone are being produced from your hypothalamus, but they are just stored here in your posterior pituitary gland. Okay? Sige. Again, oxytocin, yung oxytocin natin, they originate primarily in your paraventricular nuclei. Again, your oxytocin comes from your paraventricular nuclei. Why? Your antidiuretic hormone. Saan kaya nanggaling ang ating antidiuretic hormone? Nanggaling siya sa ating supraoptic nuclei ng ating hypothalamus. Once synthesized, pupunta sila dito sa ating posterior pituitary gland where they are being stored. Okay? Just remember that. Again, OP, oxytocin, paraventricular nuclei. Antidiuretic hormone, AS. Antidiuretic hormone, supraoptic nuclei. So remember our mnemonics, OP, AS. Oxytocin, paraventricular, Antidiuretic hormone, supraoptic nuclei. Okay? Please do not forget that. Okay? Again, hypothalamus, yung hormones natin, oxytocin and antidiuretic hormone. Hormone is made up in the cell body of the neuron. Neuron. Napakabisaya naman. Cell body of neuron. And then, the vesicles now containing hormone are stored now in your posterior pituitary. Okay? Then after that, if there's something a trigger, then the hormones now are released into the blood. Okay? Sige. Now, let's start first with your anterior pituitary gland. No? Introduction pa lang tayo. Grabe, introduction pa lang. Parang dami ng information, Doc. Sige lang, dahan-dahan lang natin. Simplify lang natin. Okay? Anterior pituitary gland, they are derived from the outgrowth of your oral mucosa. Yung rat case pouch natin. Connection of your rat case pouch with your oral cavity severed later. Okay? Part of their glands that synthesizes hormones. There will be subparts. Pars distalis, where is the pars distalis here? This portion here, this color green. Pinakamalaking portion ng ating anterior pituitary gland, pars distalis. Then you have your pars tuberalis. This is now your pars tuberalis or your pars infundibularis. And then you have your pars intermedia. This portion here, this will be your pars intermedia or your intermediate lobe. Okay? So, let's review. This is now the overview of your entire pituitary gland. So remember, this is your pituitary gland, this is your pituitary stalk, and this is now your hypothalamus, no? I hope you can see the greater picture. Hypothalamus, yung pituitary stalk that connects now your pumipiyok pa si Doc. I'm so sorry. That connects now your hypothalamus to your pituitary gland. That's gonna be your pituitary stalk, okay? And again, remember, your pituitary gland is divided into two. Anterior pituitary gland and your posterior pituitary gland. Anong bone nga ito sa ating sphenoid bone? Sinabi ko na. This is gonna be your sila turcica of your sphenoid bone. Okay? Very good. So, this is again your portion of your pituitary gland. This is now your pars distalis or yung adenohypophysis portion, and this is now your pars nervosa. So how can we delineate your pars nervosa? Remember, your pars nervosa is the neurohypophysis, the posterior portion, and this is the anterior portion. How can we delineate the two? Just remember, look for pars intermedia. This is now your pars intermedia. I hope this is a clear delineation between the two, no? This is now your pars intermedia, this portion here, okay? So again, another picture. Again, this is your pars nervosa. In terms of the color staining ability, darker staining ng ating pars distalis compared to your pars nervosa. Okay? Again, you have to locate for your pars intermedia to delineate your pars nervosa versus your pars distalis. Okay? Pars distalis, yung anterior portion. Pars nervosa, yung posterior portion ng ating pituitary gland. Again, another picture. Paulit-ulit na lang tayo. This portion here, mas lighter staining, pars nervosa, darker staining, pars distalis, and you look for pars intermedia. Okay? This portion now is your pars intermedia. Another picture. Grabe naman talaga, Doc. Paulit-ulit na talaga. See? Sinong lighter staining dito? Yung pars nervosa, which is the posterior portion. And then, this is now your pars distalis or your anterior portion. You look for again your pars intermedia, which will separate your anterior to posterior pituitary gland. Again, histologically, the two parts of your pituitary gland reflects their origin as seen in this low magnification section of your entire gland. The infundibular stalk, this portion here, and your pars nervosa, this portion here, of the neurohypophysis resembles the CNS tissue, no? You have done with a discussion with your CNS with Dr. Ian. Again, your IS here and your pars nervosa will resemble now your CNS tissue. While your pars distalis, this portion here, pars intermedia, and pars tuberalis are typically glandular in their level of staining. That's how you differentiate the two. Okay? Very good. Now, Let's go back again with the anterior pituitary gland. Remember, we have discussed the different hormones produced, right? But these hormones can be produced or synthesized by different cell types of the anterior pituitary. So what are those different cell types? You have your somatotropes, your lactotropes, gonadotropes, thyrotropes, and your corticotropes. Just remember, somatotropes, what is the hormone produced? Growth hormone. We all know the function, will stimulate your IGF. Lactotropes, or what we term as your mammotropes, prolactin. Remember your prolactin? That is important for milk secretion. Gonadotropes, gonads. Remember your gonads. So remember, think about your sex hormones. So remember your follicle, your FSH, and your LH. Okay? You have your thyrotropes, thyroid. So remember your thyrotropin or your TSH. And your corticotropes. Remember your ACTH. Okay? These are, again, the different functions that we discussed a while ago. Now, most general staining methods simply allow the parenchymal cells of your pars distalis to be subdivided now into acidophil cells, basophil cells, and your chromophobes. Again, these different cell types now will have a staining characteristics, whether they are acidophil cells or tinatawag natin yung alpha cells, basophils or basically what we term as your basophil or your beta cells, and your chromophobes. Okay, remember that. Now, what are those alpha cells? Alpha cells now are your somatotropes and your lactotropes. Again, remember, alpha cells, somatotropes, lactotropes, gonadotropes, and thyrotropes, and lastly, your corticotropes are your beta cells. Okay, review. Medyo confusing, Doc Von. First two are alpha cells. Remember that. First two are alpha cells. Gonadotropes, thyrotropes, and corticotropes are beta cells. Okay, I will explain that later. Okay? Okay, again, we discuss your pars distalis. It could be acidophils, basophils, and chromophobes. Now, most general staining methods simply now allow the parenchymal cells of your pars distalis to be divided into acidophil cells. Acidophil cells. So, letter A are your acidophil cells. Letter A here are your acidophil cells. Your letter B, on the other hand, are your basophils. Okay? And lastly, your chromophobes, or letter C here, are your chromophobes. So how can we now differentiate these cells? So acidophil, so meaning to say, the cell staining is more eosinophilic. So mas pink sila. Napapansin nyo that letter A are more pinkish because they are acidophilic. They more attract your eosinophils, right? Now, on the other hand, your basophils, no? Blue staining, basophils, no? So that's why mas lighter staining sila. Now, how can we compare it to your chromophobes? Your chromophobes now, the cytoplasm. You check the cytoplasm of the cell. The cytoplasm is poorly stained. That's how you compare. Okay? Again, your basophils, your acidophils here, they are more eosinophilic. Then your basophils, and then your chromophobes. Again, chromophobes, check the cytoplasm. If it's poorly stained, then that's going to be your chromophobes. Okay? Remember again, acidophils, basophils, and chromophobes. Acidophils, what group of cells nga sa ating anterior pituitary gland? That's going to be your somatotropes and your lactotropes. Beta cells, that's going to be gonadotropes, thyrotropes, and your corticotropes. Okay? Very good. Again, acidophil. Kita nyo, mas pink sila, acidophil. Example of your acidophil, sinasabi natin kanina, growth hormone and prolactin. Diba? Growth hormone, somatotropes, prolactin, lactotropes. So, just remember. You know what? No need to memorize everything. Just remember. Alam mo na alpha cells natin, yung ating somatotropes and your lactotropes. They are acidophils. Okay? Acidophils, growth hormone, or prolactin. Basophil, either they can produce your TSH, ACTH, FSH, and LH, no? Pink staining, blue staining, or purple staining, chromophobe, lighter or non-stained cytoplasm. No? Very easy to remember. This is a very nice picture for us to compare these different cells. Okay? Very good. Okay. Your dear pituitary gland, we have your pars distalis. So, go back again tayo sa basic. Pars distalis, biggest subpart of the gland. No? As what you can see, color green. So, they are very big. Comprises about 75% of the anterior pituitary gland. Now, it produces nearly all the hormones secreted by your pituitary gland, and the hormones collectively referred to as your anterior pituitary hormones. Again, your chromophils. We have what we say as your chromophils. The term acidophils or what we term as your alpha cells. Similar na yan sila. Alpha cells are your acidophils. Ano pa nga yung isa pa natin? The very good example ng ating acidophils or alpha cells, your somatotropes and your mammotropes, right? Remember, growth hormone and your prolactin, right? Sige. First, let's start with your somatotropes. Your somatotropes is the most abundant of your chromophils, okay? 50% of your epithelial cells are somatotropes. And they secrete your somatotropin or your growth hormone. They affect practically all cells. So again, acidophils, somatotropes, yung letter A natin dito. See? Acidophils. Acidophils. No? Pinkly stained. Next, your mammotropes. Still, also an acidophil, your alpha cell, yung letter A natin dito. 20% of your epithelial cell, they are scattered singly all over the lobe or large secretory granules than your somatotropes. They secrete your prolactin and they increase in size and number in pregnancy. Again, how can we differentiate, Doc, one, your mammotropes to your somatotropes? Then that's going to be very difficult because in a normal H&E staining like this, we cannot differentiate the two, whether that is somatotropes and your mammotropes. What we can know that, what we can only identify is that they are your acidophils based on their staining characteristic. But if you have a special staining again, then that's a time that you can differentiate these different cells. We know that your mammotropes have larger secretory granules than your somatotropes. But again, you need a specialized staining or a special microscope to do that. Now, let's have your basophils, no? Yung basophils natin, or your what we term as your beta cells. Thyrotropes, 5% of your epithelial cells. So, they also contain your secretory granules, smallest of the 5 cell types produced by your chromophils, and they can produce thyrotropin, thyroid-stimulating hormone or TSH. Remember thyrotropes, right? And remember, TSH, as I said, will stimulate now your thyroid gland to produce your thyroid hormone. Again, you will also have a discussion of your thyroid gland later. So again, beta cells, basophils, yung letter B, lightly stained. Next, we have your corticotropes. Corticotropes, which is 20% of your epithelial cells. They have a few secretory granules and only slightly larger than those in your thyrotrope. So again, they secrete corticotropin, ACTH, adrenocorticotropin, or your adrenocorticotropic hormone. These are just the same. It will stimulate now your adrenal cortex and also produces your beta lipoprotein. Okay? Just remember, corticotropins, beta cells, basophils. We also have your gonadotropes. Remember your gonads, 5% of your epithelial cell. Secretory granules, moderate and variable in size. And remember, they can produce your gonadotropin. So, gonadotropin, what are those two hormones? Your luteinizing hormone and your follicle-stimulating hormone. And these two hormones will have an effect to your gonads later on. Chromophobes. So how will we know that that's going to be your chromophobes? Very easy. They do not have any secretory granules and they also comprise 65% of your epithelial cells. How will we know that's a chromophobes? Check for the cytoplasm. If the cytoplasm is not stained, no staining capability, then that's going to be your chromophobes. Okay? Your pars tuberalis, now we're done with the pars distalis. let's proceed now with your pars tuberalis. Your pars tuberalis forms now a sleeve around your pituitary stalk. So this is your pituitary stalk. What forms now the sleeve? It's going to be your pars tuberalis, okay? This is more vascular than the anterior lobe and cell mostly gonadotropes, okay? How about your pars intermedia? This portion here. Diba? As I said, this is now the demarcation that we need to look into to differentiate your posterior from anterior, okay? Again, pars intermedia separates anterior from the posterior lobe. This is the thing that we need to check for us to determine which is anterior and which is posterior gland. Boundary with anterior demarcated by the groove that represents now your original lumen of your rod case pouch. So it is better developed in the fetus, but in adults, these are actually rudimentary, okay? They have follicles that contains now your eosinophilic colloid material, and they can also produce your melanocyte stimulating hormone, okay? Now, we're done with your anterior pituitary gland. Let's proceed now with your posterior pituitary gland. So, your posterior pituitary gland, again, it does not secrete any hormone at all, but rather, it stores your hormones produced by your hypothalamus, specifically your oxytocin and your antidiuretic hormone, okay? Antidiuretic and your oxytocin. So, it is from your neural ectoderm. What will be the parts? You have your median eminence here, your pituitary stalk, and your pars nervosa portion, okay? It is not really a gland. Take note, that's why it stores only, because basically speaking, it's not actually a gland. It does not produce any hormones at all. The secretion stored in the axon terminals of your pars nervosa, and we have a term, what we term your herring bodies. I want you to remember this one, herring bodies. Herring bodies are aggregation of the secretions, and it is deeply staining and basophilic structure. So let's take a look at this diagram later. So these are now the different hormones of the posterior gland, not synthesized but rather stored only. Antidiuretic, your vasopressin or your ADH, and your oxytocin. Your antidiuretic hormone increases water permeability of your renal collecting ducts, while your oxytocin will stimulate the contraction of your mammary gland, myoepithelial cells, and uterine smooth muscle. Okay? Now, this is now your pars nervosa of the posterior pituitary gland. It consists also of a modified neural tissues. Diba? As I said, your nervous tissue, your pars nervosa or your posterior pituitary gland resembles now your CNS tissue, as I said a while ago. That's why, because basically it is also consists of a modified neural tissues containing now your unmyelinated axon supported and ensheathed by your glial cells called now your pituicytes. This portion here, letter P, these are now your pituicytes. These are the most numerous cell present in your posterior pituitary gland. So again, when I ask, what is the most numerous cell present in your posterior pituitary gland? Your answer must be your pituicytes. Very good. The axons run from the supraoptic and paraventricular hypothalamic nuclei, and they have swellings called your neurosecretory herring bodies. Neurosecretory bodies, this portion here is now your neurosecretory bodies or your herring bodies, from which either your oxytocin and yung vasopressin natin is being released upon neural stimulation. Again ha, so that you will not be confused. Your axons now, remember your axons from your supraoptic and your paraventricular hypothalamic nuclei, they have now a swelling sa ating posterior pituitary gland. And that's gonna be your neurosecretory bodies or your herring bodies, from which either your oxytocin or vasopressin is being released upon neural stimulation. So, if there will be neural stimulation of your herring bodies, your oxytocin now and your vasopressin will be released. Okay? Very good. So, another picture. Sige, most numerous cells present in your posterior pituitary gland. The answer here is now your pituicyte. And again, this is now your herring bodies. Okay? So, this is now the posterior pituitary, mostly composed of your unmyelinated axonal process, and the terminals of your, again, supraoptic, paraventricular, and then the pituitary stalks, as we said, connects the two glands. The posterior pituitary has a characteristic presence of your herring bodies. Okay? Herring bodies, again, these are focal axonal swellings that are packed with your secretory granules. Upon stimulation here, if there will be neural stimulation, your oxytocin and your antidiuretic hormone will be released. And your pituicytes here, these cells here, pituicytes, these are glial cells of your pituitary gland, and the nuclei that are visible in sections of the posterior pituitary belongs to these cells. Okay? Very good. Okay, very good. We're done with our pituitary gland, the basic histology of your pituitary gland. I know our focus must be on the histological aspect, but then again, it's very good that you have or you need to review again the physiological aspect of these hormones so that it will be easier to correlate, no? It would be very easy to correlate these different subjects, correlate nyo yung na-learn nyo sa physiology dito sa histology, and later on, what is your learning in physiology and histology must be applied now in your clinical chemistry next semester. Okay? Now, let's proceed with your pineal gland. So, your pineal gland, where's your pineal gland? This portion here, this is your pineal gland, small, cone-shaped gland, and it arises now as an evagination of the roof of your diencephalon. Okay? The base now, it's attached here to the roof of the third ventricle by your two stalks. Okay? These are actually well developed in children, but at puberty, it will now start to involute. Okay? So, it is able to secrete what we term as now your melatonin. Okay? Hormones are elaborated by your pinealocytes. Okay? Secretion now can be stimulated by darkness and it can be inhibited by light. So it depends on the situation. If it's dark, it will stimulate the secretion now of your melatonin by your pineal gland. It is inhibited by the light. Okay? That's why in humans, blood level has the diurnal pattern. Higher at night than during day. Blood levels much higher in children than adults and may affect now your circadian rhythms and sleep patterns. Now, let's take a look at the histological aspect of this one. Your pineal glands can be divided, have capsule. So, the entire pineal gland is covered by your capsule. What is that capsule? It is also a thin connective tissue derived from your pia mater. It has also your septae, which will incompletely divide the organ into lobules. And again, the cells, majority are composed of your pinealocytes, which is 95% of the cell population. Okay? Don't be confused. Yung pituitary kanina, pituicytes naman yun. Dito, pinealocytes. Okay? Your pinealocytes can produce now your melatonin. Interstitial cells, which also comprise 5% of the cell population, and this is now your modified astrocytes. Again, your pinealocytes, these are your pinealocytes, and then your astrocytes here. Your astrocytes are the modified astrocytes or your interstitial cell. Pero majority are your pinealocytes. We also have this term, your brain sand. What is this, your brain sand? Also known as your samoma bodies or your corpora arenacea. What is this one? These are concretions of your calcium and magnesium salt, and this is a distinct feature of the gland. No, it's a very nice feature of the gland. But again, your samoma bodies is not only found in your pineal gland; it can also be found in other organ system. Again, not only this is not specific to your pineal gland, your samoma bodies, but again, this is also a very distinct feature of your pineal gland, your samoma bodies. Increase in number with age, but they will not have an effect in the gland's function. Okay? Dadami sila through time, but it does not cause certain effect to our gland's function. So again, this will be now your samoma bodies or your corpora arenacea or your brain sand. Okay? Brain sand, brain sand, brain sand, brain sand. Okay, let's proceed now to your thyroid gland. We're done with our two, your pituitary, your pineal. Right now, we will discuss about your thyroid gland. Your thyroid gland is the largest endocrine gland. Please take note of this. It's 25 to 40 gram in weight and slightly bigger in women than in men. It arises as epithelial invagination at the base of the tongue, this portion here. And it has two parts, two lateral lobes. You have the right lobe of the thyroid gland and you have the left lobe of your thyroid gland. And also have an isthmus, this portion here. What's the purpose of your isthmus? Very simple. It connects now the two glands, your right lobe and your left lobe of your thyroid gland. Okay? So, what are the functions now of your thyroid hormones? Or what are now the hormones being produced by your thyroid gland? And that's what we term as your thyroid hormones. Okay? Again, remember, what are the hormones produced by your hypothalamus? Merong term na releasing. So, that's why thyroid hormones, hypothalamus, thyroid releasing hormone. Your thyroid releasing hormone will stimulate now your pituitary gland, specifically your anterior pituitary gland, to secrete your thyroid stimulating hormone. Again, your TSH is produced by the pituitary gland. From the name itself, thyroid stimulating hormone. Therefore, it will stimulate your thyroid. TSH will stimulate your thyroid to produce the different thyroid hormones. What are those different hormones? You have your T3, you have your T4, and you also have your calcitonin. T3 or your triiodothyronine, T4 or your thyroxine hormone. Okay? Again, how does your thyroid gland, bakit kaya nasi-stimulate yung ating thyroid gland by your TSH? Remember, if there will be a low level of your thyroid hormone, so this is one trigger now. Okay, just remember, if there is a low level of your thyroid hormone, mababa ang T3 and T4, what will happen? That will send signals to your hypothalamus to release your TRH kasi nga mababa. They need to produce more thyroid hormone. The body needs thyroid hormones. So again, a low level of your thyroid hormones in the blood will stimulate now your hypothalamus to release your thyroid releasing hormone. Your thyroid releasing hormone now will stimulate your pituitary gland to release your thyroid stimulating hormone. And this thyroid stimulating hormone in turn will stimulate your thyroid gland to produce now your T3 and your T4 as your thyroid hormone. That is now the basic mechanism. Pero, Doc Von, will there be a continuous release of your TRH? Kasi nga, paano siya masasense? Paano ba mag-inhibit yung release ng ating TRH? Tama na naman. Baka sobrang release ng TRH sa dami na T3 and T4. Once there is an increased level of your thyroid hormone, it will send a negative feedback inhibition to your brain, specifically your hypothalamus, to stop the release of your TRH. That is how your hormones are being controlled. No, you see the very nice picture of your loop mechanism. Tinatawag natin tong loop mechanism. Pag sobrang dami, stop na, hindi na natin kailangan. Pag sobrang liit, gagawa tayo. So, mag-stimulate sila. Okay? This is just a sequence of event. Okay? Now, as your reading assignment, this will be your reading assignment because this is part already of physiology. What are now the steps in a thyroid hormone synthesis? Ano bang nangyayari? Once your thyroid stimulating hormone reaches your thyroid gland, paano ba nasi-synthesize yung T3 and yung T4 natin? Okay? That will be your assignment. What are now the steps in your thyroid hormone? Just read, just scan, just identify. Ano yung, di ba, mayroon tayong tinatawag na iodination, meron tayong pupunta yung T3 and T4 dito, yung sa colloid, ano nangyayari. Just try to read. It's just a review, okay? Again, this is part of our discussion. I want you to review that portion, okay? Para ma-relate natin yung ating diniscuss karon, okay? What are now the steps in your thyroid hormone synthesis? So, kindly read on that. So, your thyroid gland hormones, it can produce your thyroid hormones. Remember your thyroid hormones? It regulates the metabolism of your proteins, your carbohydrates, your fat, and some vitamins. That's the function of your thyroid hormones. Again, it is controlled by your thyroid stimulating hormone from the anterior pituitary in response to your thyrotropin releasing hormone. What are the different thyroid hormones? Thyroxine, and your triiodothyronine or your T3. And also remember, it can also produce your calcitonin. Your calcitonin or your thyrocalcitonin, it is synthesized and secreted now by your parafollicular cells. Remember, parafollicular cells produces your calcitonin. What will be the function? Lowers blood calcium level and it inhibits now bone resorption by directly suppressing your osteoclast. So, let's proceed now to the main discussion, no? Yung thyroid gland histology natin. Okay? Let's take a look at this one. Capsule. We have two capsule. You have your outer capsule. This portion here is your outer capsule. It is derived from your pretracheal layer of your deep cervical fascia. And you have a true capsule. The true capsule now is closely invest the gland. So, this is the entire gland. And then, what closely invests now the gland is your true capsule. This outer portion here is the outer capsule, okay? Remember, your capsule encloses your entire gland, okay? You also have your septae. This one here, letter S, that's going to be your septae. Your septae now will divide the organ into a poorly defined lobule. So, again, this is a septae, this is a septae. So, they divide your gland into lobules. But again, it is poorly defined. You cannot really appreciate the division, no, into lobules. This one, another lobules. It's not clearly defined, okay? So again, let's review. You have your capsule, inner capsule, outer capsule, and then you have your septae that will divide your gland into lobules, but not clearly defined. Okay, another one. Now your lobules. Let's proceed now with your lobules. Again, what separates now your gland into lobules? It's gonna be your septae. Remember that, your septae, your connective tissue or your interlobular tissue. Now, your follicles, this portion here, your follicles, several comprise each lobule, spherical, and cystic in structure. So this portion here are your follicles. Again, one structure here are your lobules. What separates into lobules? Your septae, okay? And this lobule now contains several follicles, okay? This one, your lobules. Your lobules is comprised of several follicles. It's spherical, as what you can see. Spherical, you see, spherical, cystic structures, and wall formed by a simple cuboidal epithelium. So therefore, the lining epithelium of these follicles are lined by, again, simple cuboidal epithelium. And at the center, this portion here are colloid or homogeneous gel-like material in cavity of your follicles. Again, the entire structure of your thyroid gland is surrounded by your capsule. Okay? And then, you have your septae that will divide your lobules. No? This is now your septae. And then your lobules is composed of follicles. This portion here. These are your follicles. And your follicles are lined by your simple cuboidal epithelium. Okay? And then at the middle, that's what we term as your colloid, which is now a homogeneous gel-like material in the cavity of your follicles. Okay? Very good. Again, your follicles, this one is one follicle. Several comprise each lobule. No, this is now your follicles. Thyroid follicle. And your thyroid follicle is surrounded by your simple cuboidal, and that simple cuboidal are your what we term as your follicular cells. Okay? Remember your follicular cells. Now, if it's not part of the follicle, then most probably that's going to be your parafollicular cells or your C cells. Again, remember, parafollicular cells or your C cells. Again, your parafollicular cells will produce your anong hormone nga na produce ang ating parafollicular cells? That's going to be your calcitonin. Very good. Your calcitonin is produced by your parafollicular cells or your C cells. Okay, again, let's review. Thyroid follicle, the one that will produce now your thyroid hormone, basically your follicular cells. But if it's not part of the follicular cells or your follicle, then that's going to be your parafollicular cells, which will produce now your calcitonin. Your parafollicular cells is also known as your C cells. Okay? Again, another picture. What are these cells? What are these cells? Very good. These are now your follicular cells. Question, anong tawag ganit dito? This is now your colloid. Now, question, anong yung lining epithelium? Simple cuboidal. Tignan mo naman, cube-like, no? Cube-like structure, simple cuboidal, and these are your follicular cells. Again, they are simple cuboidal, and these are now your follicular cells. Very good. Take note, comprise of overwhelming majority. Round nucleus, you can appreciate, no? Round nucleus that contains fine chromatin material. Cytoplasm is slightly basophilic. The luminal surface, this portion here, luminal surface are provided with numerous microvilli. You can appreciate a lot of microvilli here, but take note, it is not discernible under your light microscopy, okay? You need a specialized microscope to identify your microvilli in your follicles, okay? Again, your parafollicular cells. Your parafollicular cells, also known as your, maraming pangalan yung parafollicular. Mitochondria-rich cells, your C cells, your clear cells. They are only 0.1% of the cell population. And they are scattered singly or in small groups in your epithelium. They are much bigger and lighter staining than your follicular cells. So how can we compare if that's a follicular versus parafollicular? Parafollicular, think of bigger cells. You see, bigger cells, they are much bigger. What else? Lighter staining. You see, they are much lighter staining compared now to your follicular cells. Okay, note that the follicular cells is distinguished from parafollicular cells by, number 1, their smaller size. Number 2, darker staining property. That's gonna be your parafollicular. That's gonna be your follicular cells. Okay. Again, parafollicular, bigger, lighter staining. Okay, let's see. Follicular cells, follicles, follicular cells, your follicle. The entire structure here are your follicle or your thyroid follicle. And this is now your simple cuboidal epithelium or your follicular cells. And then parafollicular cells, lighter staining, right? Your parafollicular cells, they have lighter staining and what else? Lighter staining and larger size. No, very easy to appreciate. No, it's very easy to appreciate. It's parafollicular. That's follicular. Okay, we're done with your thyroid gland. Very good. Let's proceed now into your parathyroid gland. Okay? Nakakalahati na tayo, no? 47 out of 99. Kaya natin to. So, your parathyroid gland, usually 2 pairs, superior and inferior. Again, where can we locate your parathyroid gland? At the posterior portion of your thyroid gland. This is the front view or the anterior portion. This is now the posterior portion of your thyroid gland. Again, this is now your parathyroid gland, yung dilaw dito, okay? Usually 2 pairs, superior and inferior. Yellowish brown, tiny, ovoid bodies attached to the posterior surface of your thyroid gland. They lie within the capsule of your thyroid gland. So, what is the origin? Take note of this origin. This is more of a review of your anatomy. Inferior parathyroid gland, this portion here, arise from the third pharyngeal pouch together with the thymus. Your superior parathyroid gland arise naman from the fourth pharyngeal pouch and attach themselves to your thyroid glands. Okay? So, let's proceed to the histological aspect of your parathyroid gland. Capsule. So again, we all know capsule surrounds your parathyroid gland. Thin connective tissue, again, septae, and completely subdivide the gland into lobules. So you can also have your septae, but however, it incompletely subdivide the gland into lobules. You also have your parenchyma. Your parenchyma is composed of different epithelial cells. It could be in cords and clusters. You can have capillaries, which is very numerous, and adipose cells at age 25 comprise about 30% of the volume of your glands, up to 50% in the older individual. So this portion now here of your parathyroid, your parathyroid are now your adipose tissue. Remember that, 30% of the volume up to 50% when you become older. Your follicles, occasionally present in older individuals, resemble your thyroid gland. Okay? What are the cells that we can identify here? you have your chief cells, and you have your oxyphil cells. So you have your epithelial cells. So let's identify the different epithelial cells. First cell, you have your chief or principal cells. Remember, chief or your principal cells. Majority of the cells, relatively small. What else? Polyhedral, homogeneous, cytoplasm, and it's faintly eosinophilic. Okay? Now, it elaborate and secrete your parathyroid hormone. Remember this. It will secrete and elaborate your parathyroid hormone. Again, chief cells or principal cells will produce your parathyroid hormone. And again, question, your C cells will produce your calcitonin. Don't get confused, ha? No, this is very confusing on the part of the students because ang dami-daming mga different cells. C cells, para sa kanila, C cells is the chief cells. No ha, don't be confused of that, okay? Kindly take down notes. Sulat nyo, tapos try to remember and memorize. Until such time na paulit-ulit na memorize nyo lang yan, okay? How about your oxyphil cells? Your oxyphil cells, on the other hand, these are your acidophil cells. Acidophil cells appear shortly before puberty, increase in number with age. They can occur singly or in clusters. Bigger. Take note, ha? One important differentiating factor, they are bigger than chief cells. So see, oxyphil cells, bigger. Oxyphil cells here, they are bigger. But the nuclei are smaller. The cytoplasm with many acidophilic granules, hence intensely eosinophilic. Take note, you see, they are intensely eosinophilic compared to your chief cells. That's why, you know, napaka-pink, klaro. This one portion here, napaka-pink. So therefore, these are now your oxyphil cells. Compared here, your chief cells, this portion here, are now your chief cells. Okay? Non-secretory and function is unknown. Okay? The non-secretory and function is still unknown. Okay, how about this one? Again, more eosinophilic, oxyphil, and the rest are your chief cells. So how about your parathyroid hormone? What's the function of your parathyroid hormone? Your parathyroid hormone, the only hormone produced by the parathyroid gland. Again, please take note of this one. Parathyroid hormone, the only hormone produced by the parathyroid gland. And it is being secreted by your chief cells. This is very important regulator of your blood calcium level. Okay? So remember, ano yung oxyphil cells? Anong function ng oxyphil cells? Still unknown. But there are theories na meron siyang function and I want you to read on that. I want you to read a journal. Ano ba yung function ng ating oxyphil cells? Okay? Please take note of that. So again, your parathyroid hormone secreted by your chief cells, the only hormone produced by your parathyroid gland. So let's take a look at this one. What will now be our trigger for the release of your parathyroid hormone? Remember, your parathyroid hormone is very important regulator of your blood calcium level. So if you have a low blood calcium level, it will be detected by the parathyroid gland. Mababa ang aking calcium. Madidetect ng parathyroid hormone. So anong gagawin ng parathyroid hormone? It will now release your parathyroid hormone. Your parathyroid hormone will have an effect to the bone. What will happen to the bone? Your parathyroid hormone will stimulate your osteoclastic activity. Remember, osteoclast cells? Osteoclasts will cause destructions of your bone. If it will cause bone resorption or destruction, it will release now calcium in the bloodstream. So, marirelease ang calcium, thereby tataas ang serum calcium. Okay? Very good. How about sa kidney? Anong effect ni parathyroid hormone sa kidney? Yung parathyroid hormone naman natin will stimulate reabsorption of calcium from the urine. And mas mai-excrete yung ating phosphate. So again, yung calcium tataas kasi nga i-reabsorb, so tataas ating serum calcium. What else? It will also stimulate the activation of your It will also, your PTH will stimulate the activation of your vitamin D in your kidney. So, ma-activate yung vitamin D and your active vitamin D now will in turn cause increased absorption and calcium from the diet. Okay? It causes now, so ang end effect itong lahat, increase serum calcium. Now, mababa ang mataas na ang ating serum calcium. What will happen? It will now create a inhibitory feedback, negative feedback sa ating parathyroid gland to stop the release of your parathyroid hormone. Kasi nga, mataas na ang serum calcium. Na-normalize na nating serum calcium. Okay? That's how the function of your PTH. No, very easy. So therefore, we say that your parathyroid hormone will have a direct effect to the bone and your kidney, but indirect effect to your small intestine. Bakit? Kasi nga, it's the kidney that will be activated. Yung kidney natin, yung nag-activate ng vitamin D, siya yung nagsistimulate sa ating small intestine, not directly from the PTH. But then again, all of this one, ang end effect natin is to increase your serum calcium. Okay? Very good. Next, we have your last two hormones, last two glands na lang tayo. We have your adrenal gland. Okay? Sige, isa-isahin natin. Adrenal gland. Adrenal gland. Other name ng ating adrenal gland, suprarenal. Bakit kaya tinawag nating suprarenal? Simply because it is found above your renal gland. That's why we call it suprarenal gland. It's paired. You can see that left, right, and left. So, it will depend now on the shape. If it's in the right suprarenal, it's pyramidal in shape. If it's left suprarenal, it's semilunar in shape. On the upper poles, again, they are located at the upper pole of your kidneys. Each weighs about 5 grams and 50 millimeters long or high, 30 millimeters wide, and 10 millimeters thick. For sure, no need to memorize this one. Grabe naman. Pag ito pa talaga ipalabas ko, no, grabe na talaga. No need, no, syempre. Just a review of your anatomy, okay? At least you're familiar. It's around 5 grams, no? Hilus. You have a hilus, which is an indentation at the middle of your anteromedial aspect, where your adrenal vein and your leaves the gland. Note, your adrenal arteries, take note, your adrenal arteries now, your adrenal arteries enters the gland through your capsule. So therefore, your adrenal gland also have your capsule. Remember your capsule, which is the outer covering of this gland. So again, this is now your adrenal gland, or what we term as your suprarenal gland. Please take note, this is the major layer of your adrenal gland. You have your capsule. This is now your capsule. You have your cortex. And you have your medulla. Okay? Capsule, your cortex, and your medulla. Okay? And your cortex. You see? Again, capsule, your cortex, and your medulla here. And again, your capsule, your cortex. Your cortex is subdivided into 3 layers. You have the upper portion, zona glomerulosa, followed by your zona fasciculata, and lastly, your zona reticularis. Okay? Again, glomerulosa, fasciculata, reticularis. Okay? Okay, sige. Review natin. Again, histological view. This is the gross picture. Ito yung gross picture natin. And this will be now the histological view of your adrenal gland. Again, this portion here is your capsule. Capsule, followed by zona glomerulosa. This portion here is your zona fasciculata, GFR. Next, followed by your zona reticularis. From glomerulosa to reticularis, that's your adrenal cortex. Then, followed by your medulla. Okay? So, let's start first with your adrenal gland capsule. This is the adrenal gland capsule at this portion. They are relatively thick, collagenous connective tissue, rich in reticular fibers, and the elements penetrate gland up to the medulla. So, it can penetrate up to your medullal area. Okay? Now, you have your adrenal cortex, this portion here. This is now your adrenal cortex. Your adrenal cortex now is the outer area. It completely surrounds your adrenal medulla. And take note, adrenal cortex is mesodermal in origin and they are essential for life. 80 to 90% of the adrenal glands, and it produces your different steroid hormones, your adrenocortical hormones. So that's the reason, essential for life, because of the different hormones produced by your adrenal cortex. We will discuss later. How about your adrenal medulla? Your adrenal medulla, this portion here, this is ectodermal in origin and they are not essential for life. Basically, referring to the hormones being produced. So take note, again, as a review, adrenal cortex layer, you have your zona glomerulosa, zona fasciculata, zona reticularis, this is now your cortex, and the medulla, adrenal medulla. Let's review the hormones being produced by your adrenal cortex. Glomerulosa, take note, it can produce your hormones, your mineralocorticoids. Example of that will be your aldosterone, which will regulate mineral balance. You have your zona fasciculata, your glucocorticoids, which will produce your cortisol, corticosterone, and cortisone. You have also your zona reticularis, which can produce your androgens, which will stimulate masculinization, specifically your dihydroepiandrosterone. Okay? Again, this is the very bigger picture now of your adrenal cortex. Ulit-ulit na natin ng mga diagram. Isa-isahin natin ng mga layers. So, first layer, we have your adrenal cortex, your zona glomerulosa. Your zona glomerulosa, again, it follows your capsule. Below your capsule, zona glomerulosa, this portion here. Your zona glomerulosa is 15% of the cortex. How will we know that that's going to be zona glomerulosa? Because you see, you have rounded or pyramidal cells arranged in irregular ovoid clusters. You see, you see irregular ovoid clusters here, no? Ovoid clusters, irregular. Cell clusters separated by your sinusoids. You have sinusoids that are supported by your connective tissue septae. So you have your sinusoids here. You have your sinusoids. These are your sinusoids. And again, you have irregular ovoid clusters. And that will give you a clue that's going to be zona glomerulosa. Now the cells is deeply stained nucleus with 1 or 2 nuclei. The cytoplasm of each of these cells is very scant and they are highly eosinophilic. Okay? So your zona glomerulosa will produce your mineralocorticoids, mainly your aldosterone. So the hormone produced by the cells of this zona. So what is the function of your aldosterone? Simple. Increases sodium reabsorption by collecting the tubules of the kidney. It controls now your aldosterone secretion, mainly by RAAS or secondary by your corticotropin from your anterior pituitary. Now, what's the purpose of your aldosterone now? Remember, zona glomerulosa, mineralocorticoids produces aldosterone. What's the purpose of your aldosterone? Sodium reabsorption. Remember the dictum? Where sodium goes, water follows. So, therefore, you will have now an idea of what will happen if patient is being hypotensive. What will be one of the physiological mechanism that will happen to the body? For example, the patient is hypovolemic, mababa ang volume ng katawan, mababa ang blood volume ng katawan. For example, may bleeding ang patient natin, came to the ER with bleeding, severe bleeding. So mababa, mababa. So one physiological aspect of the body is to maintain your water volume. So how can the body maintain the water volume? It's through the secretion now of your aldosterone. Because remember, your aldosterone will cause now increased sodium reabsorption in the kidney. So if there will be sodium reabsorption by the kidney, water will follow. So you want to conserve now your water to maintain that specific volume. So that's why one mechanism sa ating katawan when we have a low volume of water is through sodium reabsorption by the action of your aldosterone. Okay? Remember that. That's the action of your aldosterone. Okay? Now, let's have your zona fasciculata. Zona fasciculata, thickest layer. This is now the thickest layer, this portion of your adrenal cortex. Cells form long, thin, usually one cell thick, straight cords arranged perpendicular to your capsule. So your cords separated by sinusoids, so also separated by your sinusoids here that are supported by a fine connective tissue. So how can we compare now? Again, your glomerulosa versus your zona glomerulosa versus now your zona fasciculata in terms of their histological picture. Remember again, zona glomerulosa, yung circular na irregular, no? Yung irregular na circles dito. Irregular circle dito, yung irregular ovoid clusters natin. Yung zona fasciculata naman, on the other hand, meron silang very long na straight cords, no? This looks like a cords, right? Straight cords, you see? Long, straight cords arranged perpendicular to the capsule, okay? Long, straight cords. So that's how we know that's gonna be zona fasciculata, okay? What are the cells? So the cells in your zona fasciculata, we term that as your spongocytes, no? These are now your spongocytes. What are these spongocytes? Spongocytes, they are large polyhedral vesicular nucleus with a very prominent nucleolus. They are very abundant and faintly basophilic cytoplasm. And take note, the cytoplasm are vacuolated because of the different many lipid droplets. Again, these are now your spongocytes, no? Your spongocytes, abundant, faintly basophilic cytoplasm. Merong vacuolation yung kanyang cytoplasm because of the different lipid droplets. Okay? So what is now the hormone being produced by your zona fasciculata? It's going to be your glucocorticoids, no? Hormones produced by cells of this zona. This is mainly your cortisol and your corticosterone. They regulate your carbohydrate, lipid, and your protein metabolism. Primary regulator of the activity of your zona fasciculata is your, remember your ACTH produced from your anterior pituitary gland. So your ACTH will act now to your zona fasciculata because it will now release your glucocorticoids, releasing now your cortisol, okay? Adrenocorticotropic hormone. Tinawag natin corticotropic. Remember your word because it produces now your cortisol sa ating adrenal cortex, specifically yung zona fasciculata, okay? Next, we have your zona reticularis. Yung zona reticularis, innermost, and the thinnest layer, pinakamanipis na layer. Cells, small, and arranged in short anastomosing cords. Tinapapansin nyo, nagdidikit-dikit sila, nag-anastomose sila, or para silang branching. So, since mas mababa, mas maliit yung cords nila, and nag-anastomose sila, then that's already been a clue. That's your zona reticularis, okay? At least you have a very nice picture na kung how can we identify. We can identify zona glomerulosa once meron tayo nakikitang irregular ovoid structures. Pag fasciculata, long cords. Pag reticularis naman, small and short anastomosing cords, no? I hope you can already picture out this, okay? Cells, histologically similar to cells of zona fasciculata, but less vacuolated, less lipid droplets, and nucleus stain more intensely. Again, what will be the hormones produced by your adrenal gland? The primary regulator of activity of cells of this zone is your corticotropin or your ACTH from your anterior pituitary. Gonadotropins do not affect the cells of your zona reticularis, okay? A small quantity of your glucocorticoids, your cortisol, and your corticosterone. So again, you have also your androgens, your dehydroepiandrosterone, your DHA, and your androstenedione, okay? The activity is less than 20% of those of your testicular androgen. And take note, it's not enough to induce masculinization of your women. Kaya nagtataka kayo, meron palang napuproduce. Yes, meron kayong androgens na napuproduce, but for the females. But take note, it's not enough to induce now your masculinization, okay? Now let's proceed. So we're done with your adrenal cortex. Again, let's review your GFR, your different layers of your zona adrenal cortex. We have your zona glomerulosa, zona fasciculata, and your zona reticularis, yung GFR. Let's proceed now to your adrenal medulla. Your adrenal medulla is only 10 to 20% of your adrenal gland. It's very thin, completely surrounded by your cortex, and the central part with large medullary veins that drain the entire gland, okay? So what are the cells that we can see in your adrenal medulla? We have your chromaffin cells. Remember the term? Chromaffin cells. Chromaffin cells, most of the adrenal medulla is consist of these cells. So maraming chromaffin cells. They are arranged in groups or thick cords that are surrounded by sinusoids and richly supplied with nerves. All are associated now with endings of your preganglionic sympathetic neurons. And take note, they are polyhedral parenchymal cells. And take note also, very darkly stained nucleus. No, napapansin nyo, you can appreciate the chromaffin cells. Again, majority of your adrenal medulla is comprised of your chromaffin cells. Chromaffin cells are darkly stained nucleus, and they have now a very basophilic cytoplasm. Okay? Why do we call them as chromaffin cells? Chromaffin, so called because of the secretory granules that turn brown when treated with an oxidizing agent like chromate. So, chromaffin reaction. Ito yung tinatawag natin na chromaffin reaction. You also have your ganglion cells. So again, yung ganglion cells natin dito, this portion here, neurons scattered among chromaffin cells. Pero majority pa rin yung nakikita natin are your chromaffin cells. So your adrenal medulla secretions, three kinds of catecholamines. You have your epinephrine, secreted 90% of your chromaffin cells. You have your norepinephrine or your noradrenaline, which is secreted by 10% of your chromaffin cells. Take note, stronger chromaffin reaction, granules are more electron dense. But take note, they can also produce your dopamine. No? Your dopamine cells that secrete this have not been identified yet. No? At this time, wala pang cells na na-identify kung ano saan ba galing yung ating dopamine. So, maybe some of you here in the future can identify those cells, okay? Sana ipangalan nyo sa akin, Von cell. Ay, sa akin nyo nalang ipangalan na. Okay, again, you have different three kinds of cell, epinephrine, norepinephrine, and your dopamine cells, okay? Sorry, your dopamine, not dopamine cells. I'm sorry, dopamine. Diba, remember, you're familiar with the epinephrine and norepinephrine, the fight or flight response hormone. Your chromaffin cells can also synthesize wide variety of products, such as your bioactive amines and even your peptides. So again, this is not just the summary of the things that we discussed a while ago in terms of the hormones produced, the composition, the source, and the major functions. So I want you to review on this, read on this, so that you can learn more about the functions of those different hormones that we discussed. For example, yung norepinephrine, epi, what will be the function, what will be the effect sa ating heart, etc., etc. Okay, we're done to our last gland. Now, this is gonna be your pancreas. Okay? Last na talaga tayo. Almost done. Sige. So, your pancreas, this is now a very elongated organ which lies obliquely across now the posterior abdominal wall at the level of your L1 and L2 of your vertebral body. So this is very technical, very anatomy. Take note, you all know that your pancreas is both an exocrine and also both an endocrine gland. But for now, we will focus our discussion on the endocrine gland. Both endocrine and exocrine gland components are in the lobules, okay? So, let's proceed now to the histological components of your pancreas. You have your stroma. Your stroma, it has a capsule also, thin layer of connective tissue, and we all know you have your septa that will divide the glands into distinct lobules. And parenchyma, which is composed of your different glandular epithelium. So you see, there will be different glandular epithelium all throughout your lobules. In terms of the exocrine portion, again, our discussion, it's still more of the endocrine. Just a review of the exocrine portion. The exocrine portion now is compound. It's compound tubuloalveolar gland. And take note, it secretes your pancreatic juices. No? Pancreatic juices, this is now important for your digestive enzymes. So, mga enzymes yung mga nasisikret niyan, which will digest now sa protein, carbohydrate, and fat digestion. I'm not sure if you're done with the digestive system already, but as far as I know, this will be part already of your digestive system. Remember, the exocrine portion is the digestive portion of your pancreas because it can secrete your different pancreatic juices that will digest different products of the body, different sources of products, your protein, your carbohydrate, and your fats. Take note, your exocrine, just an overview. Your exocrine portion is 98% of the entire lobule. And we call the secretory portions that are called your pancreatic acini. No, we term that your pancreatic acini. This is now your pancreatic acinus. Natawag natin na pancreatic. Do not worry guys ha, will not be part of the quiz because exocrine portion ito. Just an overview lang. Overview lang talaga ito. Okay, do not worry. At least you have familiar, you can differentiate exocrine versus endocrine. Okay, this portion now here is the acinar cells. Remember your pancreatic acinus, this is part of your exocrine portion. Okay, pancreatic acinus is composed of your acinar cells. Okay, remember pancreatic acinus is exocrine in portion. Okay, this is not part of our discussion but just an overview. Pancreatic acinus, they are closely packed. They are formed of your columnar or pyramidal cells, no? And synthesize enzymatic components of your pancreatic juice. Remember, for your digestion, okay? So therefore, this portion here, we take a picture here, pinalaki natin. So therefore, this is now your pancreatic exocrine portion of your pancreas. This big circle now, ito yung talagang main part ng ating discussion. This is now what we term as your pancreatic islet. Yung pancreatic islet natin is the endocrine portion of your pancreas. Ito yung focus ng ating discussion. Again, this is the endocrine portion. So let's take a look at this. Again, we say that your exocrine portion is 98%. So 98% here, these are exocrine portion. And remember, islets of Langerhans will represent the endocrine portion. Ano yung islets of Langerhans? Yung pabilog. So therefore, dito, napapansin nyo may mga arrow, mga malilit na may arrow, that's now your islets of Langerhans. And that is the endocrine portion of the pancreas. I hope that is clear, ha? I hope that is clear. At least you have a distinction between what is endocrine and what is exocrine. Okay, we'll not focus more on the ducts anymore. This is too technical now. Let's proceed directly to our islets of Langerhans. Sa endocrine portion na tayo, okay? Yung endocrine portion natin is only 2%. So again, yung may mga arrow dyan, that's your islets of Langerhans. In this routine H&E preparation, it is difficult to identify specific islet cell types without a special stain. Remember, your islets of Langerhans, we can identify the different cells. It composed of different cells. But the different cells here cannot be distinguished. Hindi natin ma-identify whether that is alpha cells, beta cells, delta cells, because you need a special stain. If in a routine H&E, usually yung ginagamit lang natin, we cannot identify. It's just a normal cell here. This is now your islets of Langerhans. Again, this is the islets of Langerhans, lightly stained, therefore, and circular. Therefore, this is now the endocrine portion. Let's go here. So your islets of Langerhans, these are aggregation of pale staining cells in H&E preparation, which is scattered through the darker staining cells of your exocrine. So the darker portion now is the exocrine, and this portion is the endocrine portion. Combined volume is only 2%, more numerous in the tail than in the body or the head. So islets of Langerhans, lighter portion. It's polygonal, polarized, toward the capillaries into which they discharge their secretions. Okay? So again, islets of Langerhans, cell types not distinguishable in H&E because you can identify the different islets of Langerhans cells. You have your alpha cells, which will secrete glucagon. You have your delta cells, which secrete somatostatin. You have your beta cells, which secretes now your insulin. But again, you cannot appreciate that. You need a special type of staining method. So first, we have your alpha cell, your A cell or your alpha cell. This is 20% of your islet cell. This is a large cell and most occupy the peripheral areas of your islets. Okay? Electron-dense secretory granules of a uniform site. And take note, your alpha cell will secrete glucagon. What's the function of your glucagon? Your glucagon will cause now the production or increase of your glucose level, no? Pag mababa ang glucose level ng ating katawan, if there will be a low level of glucose, your glucagon will act upon, okay? Will act upon so that your glucose will be released. Act on several tissue to make energy stored in glycogen and fat available through glycogenolysis and lipolysis. Through these steps, your glucose now will be released, causing an increased blood glucose level. So therefore, your glucagon is being released if there is a low level of sugar level in a body, in our body, okay? Again, your alpha cells here, this portion here, which is your alpha cells, produces your glucagon. Alpha cells, this portion here are your alpha cells. So, using now a special stain, you can appreciate the different types of cell. Alpha cells here, this portion here are your alpha cells. Based on our description, saan natin matatagpuan nito? Large cell and most occupy peripherally. So, they occupy peripherally. So, usually they are peripherally. So, this is now your alpha cells. As what you can see, they look like, they can be localized peripherally. But in this diagram, no, hindi naman to peripherally, no, they are scattered all throughout, no, basically. Your beta cells, on the other hand, this is the most numerous, which is 60 to 75% of the islet cells. Most are in central area of your islet, smallest of the cell islet, and the secretory granules, smaller and less electron dense than a cell. So, secretes now your insulin and can cause entry of glucose into the cell. So, what will be the function? It promotes decrease of blood glucose content. So, the function now of your insulin is opposite to glucagon. Yung glucagon natin, papalabasin ng glucose para marami yung glucose sa ating katawan or sa ating blood. The function now of your insulin, once there are too much level of glucose, masyadong maraming glucose sa katawan natin, the function of your insulin now is to transfer your glucose from the blood towards the cell. Papapasukin niya. Cause entry of glucose in the cell, which will now in turn decreasing the blood glucose level in our body. Okay? Again, what is the location of our islets of Langerhans? Of your beta cells, sorry. Central areas of the islets. Beta cells, you see, mas marami sila. Sila ang pinakamarami. They are located centrally. Again, dito, insulin-producing cells, beta cells, they are located centrally. But here, no, scattered pa rin sila. Next, you have your delta cells. Your delta cells, only about 5% of the islet cell population. Scattered singly all or over the islets and largest of the islet cells. So, mas malaki sila. You all know that's gonna be your delta cells. And what will be the function of your delta cells? Secretes your somatostatin. Remember, somatostatin is inhibitory in nature. Yan yung trabaho niya. Inhibit niya yung glucagon, i-inhibit niya yung insulin. Marami pa yan siyang i-inhibit. Basta, remember, when you hear the word somatostatin, dapat mag-ring a bell. Somatostatin, inhibitory. So, remember the last two letter, IN, somatostatin, IN, inhibitory. Yan yung function ng ating somatostatin. Wala nang iba. Inhibitory. For glucagon, for insulin, and other hormones. Again, your delta cell, produced by some cells of the digestive tract. Physiologic effect, hypothalamic somatostatin is different. Inhibits, so take note, inhibits other islets hormone, inhibit the growth hormone and TSH, inhibit your HCl secretion by your gastric parietal cell, no? Again, your somatostatin is inhibitory in nature. So again, as I said, yung delta cells natin are scattered, no? Scattered sila. Again, this is now your delta cells. And lastly, you have your islets of your F cells or your tinatawag natin na PP cell. F cell or your PP cell. F cell is very rare. They are widely scattered and sometimes occurs among the pancreatic acini. So it's not only found on the endocrine portion or the islets of Langerhans, but the F cell or the PP cell can be scattered also in your pancreatic acini. Secretory granules, irregular in shape and variable in electron. And take note, secretes pancreatic polypeptide. This will be the function of it one. It will secrete pancreatic polypeptide. Kaya tinawag natin na PP cell. They will now stimulate the activity of your gastric chief cell and they will inhibit your bile secretion. So, it's not only inhibitory but can also stimulate gastric chief cell, inhibit bile secretion, inhibit pancreatic enzyme, and inhibit intestinal motility. So unlike your somatostatin, talaga lahat somatostatin inhibitory. But your F cell, it could be stimulatory or inhibitory in nature. Okay? So again, F cell scattered all throughout. So this now, your F cell are very rare. So ito, pinaka-rare na nakita natin is yung F cell. Okay? Okay, that ends our lecture. I know marami kayong babasahin sa libro. Again, I just want to emphasize, you have to read your book, okay? My lecture will not always be the main reference. As always said, paulit-ulit na sinasabi ko, na hindi talaga ang lecture namin ang main reference. It's always been the book, okay? There are things that we're not discussing here na nadidiscuss ng book, and I want you to read on that, okay? And sige lang, medyo nahihirapan kayo, just try to read the book. Medyo may idea na kayo based on my discussion. And then, nood ulit kayo ng lecture video ko. Then, basa kayo ulit. You know what, no? It's a matter of repetition. No, you know what? It's just a matter of repetition. Hindi siya kasi na one-time reading, one-time viewing, and that's it. No. It needs a repetition. Kasi nga, the more na ginaulit-ulit nyo basahin, the more na ulit-ulit nyo pinapanood ang lecture video, the more na maiintindihan ninyo. Okay? I know wala kayong time, but just try it, okay? So, if you have any questions or clarifications, please do not hesitate to message me, okay? Medyo mahaba, pero kaya natin. Thank you everyone and have a great day.